It's Lindsay Upton the Quilt Quine, exploring how a quilter might use the Bernina L890 overlocker cover stitch machine. Now, like many quilters, I have an awful lot of leftover bits of wadding and fabric and so on. I might even have the odd bundle of charm squares or even jelly rolls that I have bought thinking, ooh, they'll be nice, but I've never got around to doing anything with them. So I have cut up a pile of leftover scraps into 5-inch squares, which are pretty much the same as charm packs. I've got a little workstation behind me with a mini ironing board and an iron. I've got a pile of 5-inch wadding squares, which I cut with scissors, I have to be honest, because when you do try and cut wadding on a mat, it makes an awful fluffy mess. I've got 5-inch pretty squares like this, a selection, and then I've got 5-inch plain squares. I like to use plain because it doesn't really matter which way up it goes in case I get in a muddle. So here's the first little bundle. We have a pretty square the right way up, we have wadding underneath, and we have a piece of plain backing. Now here's the tricky stuff. You have to take another piece of pretty stuff, got one on my lap here, plonk it on the top, right side down. So you're now looking at the wrong side. On top of that, you put another piece of wadding, and underneath everything, a piece of plain. So there are 6 layers which you have to line up nicely and hold with a couple of clips until you're ready to take it to the machine. Today I've got the L890 set up to do a 4-thread overlock, stitch number 1. So it's going to munch its way through all 6 of those layers. I've got on a clear foot for visibility, and I've even got on a seam guide to give me a perfect 1/4 inch seam. So I've taken my little stack over to the machine, I've just put it under the foot, and I'm ready to go with my first little stack. Okay, my first stack of 6 layers is just under the foot, ready to go. I've taken one of the clips off because the foot is now holding it in place, and before I get to that clip I will obviously undo it. So the first thing to do is stitch that together, and the knife is just going to cut a sliver off the edge. Okay, here we go. We don't have to go fast. And we just chain off, and I'll just snip that with my scissors. Now, the thing to do is to open it all out. So there we have 2 pretty patchwork pieces. And if I just unfold that bit of backing and pull it across, you can see that there are no raw edges. Now, the sensible thing to do at this point would be to take it over to my little ironing station and give it a press so it stays nice and lined up. So I'll do that, and then I will layer up the next little stack. I've got my first 2 little bundles sewn together. I've given them a bit of a press to flatten the seam. So no raw edges on the back and no raw edges on the top. Now this is more or less a variation of Quilt As You Go, because some quilters hate quilting, would you believe? They find it difficult to pin or baste the whole thing together, and some people don't have an awful lot of room to play with. So this seems like a quite good method of just making a quilt all in one go, so that all you're left to do at the end, hopefully, is just bung on some binding. Perfect for little last-minute gifts and charity quilts, I think. So I'm ready to put on my next stack. Right, I have got my 3rd block in the project ready to go. So I've got a piece of backing underneath, and it doesn't matter which way up it goes because it's plain. There's the project already. There's a new piece of fancy stuff going face down, and the wadding is on the top. So again, it's 6 layers thick, and the overlocker should make a nice job of squashing down that bulky seam. So, number 3, ready to go. Block 4, ready to attach. I now have 4 little blocks all joined together, which is big enough to have a go at this technique. I'm going to go away and make another 4 and then see how we can join them together. I now have 2 strips of little quilted bundles, fancy side, wadding inside and backs with no visible seams. So the next thing to work out is how to join those together. So I'm thinking of using a flat lock and see if that works. I've got my 2 strips of Quilt As You Go squares ready to join together. So I've put the right sides together. I've got clips going down the side because it's quite bulky. I don't want it to slip too much. I'm going to go quite slowly, and I'm going to try to stitch them together using a 3-thread flat lock wide, stitch number 5. Let's see how we get on. Oh, and I also moved the seam allowance a smidge, hopefully, so that the overlocked stitches will be inside the finished seam. Let's see. Just remove the clips as I get to them. Go slowly. There's a very bulky seam coming up. Let's go on over it. It's just shaving off an absolute sliver from the side. Another big seam. We're over it. Might have to get a little help at that point. I did change to a pink thread because I thought that that would look rather good. So it's attached, and then what you do is you open it out and you gently pull, you can see, and you get a ladder stitch effect all the way down the seam, because I want it to lie flat. That's why it's called a flat lock. I'm just opening it out by easing the stitches out. And there we go. I can just continue to tweak it until it sits flat on both sides, and then I shall press it. On the back, it looks like an overlocked seam, but it's not offensive. I was curious to see what would happen if I ran a cover stitch over the top of this flat lock, because I think it would look quite nice on the back. However, it is a very bulky project, so I'm having to be rather careful. I'm using the 4-thread cover stitch number 21, and I'm trying to keep the middle needle right in the ditch. So let's see how we get on. A bulky seam, it's managed. Another one. Just got to take a bit of a deep breath and hope for the best. There we are. If we just flip it over to the other side, it looks like that. So it's got potential. It's not perfect yet. I need to work on it a little bit more, but I could live with that, I think. So I've had a go at doing a type of Quilt As You Go just using squares on the overlocker. Now, I did wonder, Could I also do the same with a log cabin? Then I wouldn't have to worry about joining the edges together because I could just go round and round and round until my project was as big as I wanted it to be. So I'm going to start with a 5-inch square in the middle, and then I'm going to see if I can attach 3-inch strips on. Let's just have a go. Okay, so we're going to have a go at this Quilt As You Go method with a log cabin block, just to see what happens. So we start off with our 5-inch foundation bundle, I suppose you could say. So there's the pretty side, the wadding and the backing. Plain in my case because I get confused. Underneath I've got a piece of backing that's going to make the first log. Then I have a log shaped pretty piece which is going right sides together, and a log shaped piece of wadding on the top. I don't do a lot of pre-measuring when I do log cabin. I'll cut the squares the right size, I'll cut a load of strips the same size, and then I'll just use my scissors to trim it as you go. So it's not absolutely accurate top and bottom, but it should line up nicely down the edge. Let's see. Righto, this time we are going to attempt to see if we can do this Quilt As You Go method with log cabin blocks. Here's the first one. The machine is barely trimming off anything because I've got on the seam guide as a 1/4 inch seam allowance from there to the left-hand needle. So it has squished very nicely through all of those layers, and then if I flip this open like this, and I will press it, there's the central log, the big one, and this is my first side log. So next I need to put one along here. I might just give this excess a rough trim with my scissors. Okay, I have the second round of my log cabin ready to go. So you turn the corner, there is the pretty side, a slightly longer piece going face down. There is a plain piece going down the back. Now you can use pattern stuff, but I think you're asking for trouble because you're just going to get confused. And the wadding goes on the top. Haven't trimmed it particularly top and bottom. It's going to do it rather nicely down the edge, and then I'll be ready to attach my next block. So far I'm loving this. It's going together really well. Okay, log number 3 is attached. And there's the back. No raw seams. I need to press it, give it a bit of a tidy up before I attach the next round, which will go down that side. And you generally work round in a clockwise direction. So I'm just going to keep going until I run out of bits of fabric. I have been working away at my log cabin sample. Here we go. It's about 21 to 22 inches square, so I could turn it into a big floor cushion. I could carry on and make it into a baby quilt, or I could just say, well done, I've done a sample. The back is like this, so there are no raw edges. Another thing I could do is make another giant block like this and join the two of them together with a flat lock. It doesn't actually require any further quilting because it's completely held together. However, I might be inclined to go back and do something more on this. I could go crazy with free motion quilting. I could put it on the long arm. I could actually use the L890 to run some cover stitches or chain stitch up and down decoratively with some fancy thread. We'll see. I'm just going to put it to one side for now and have a think about it.